Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar focused on healthcare appliances. I am Jackie Garcia, and I'm part of the Efficiency for Access Design Challenge team and the facilitator of this webinar today. As a reminder, these webinars are designed for the participants of the Efficiency for Access Design Challenge, which is an initiative led by the Efficiency for Access with support from Engineers Without Borders UK. This webinar is being recorded and the cameras and microphones are disabled except for those of the main speakers, but you all can use the chat box to make any comments or questions for our speakers at any time. Today, Luke Sveri will give us an overview of the main barriers holding back large-scale electrification on healthcare appliances with a sub-focus on the appliance angle. Assumpta will share with us an overview of the healthcare sector in Uganda, and in particular, and the experience of new pendant, new GAR monitor appliance. At the end, you will have the opportunity to give your opinion in a very short survey on your experience of this webinar. I would like to introduce you our speakers today. Luke Sveri, it's a senior energy access specialist at Sustainable Energy for All, focusing on the energy access gap in the last mile, in particular for the health sector and the humanitarian sector. Luke holds Masters in Commercial Engineering from KUL Leuven and a Masters on Science Development Management from the London School of Economics. Prior to starting his current position, Luke worked in Mozambique, Senegal, and Liberia for several international NGOs and social enterprises, including Solar Now and Save the Children International, as well as for the UN Foundation. Assumpta is a pharmacist and clinical researcher with over 5 years of experience in designing and implementing clinical trials and epidemiological studies on health innovators. Luke will be with us for the first half an hour of the webinar, as he has other commitments to attend, but doesn't want to miss the opportunity to be here with you today and answer any questions you may have. So please make sure you share your questions and comments on the chat box so he can address them right after his presentation. And now, without further ado, Luke, the floor is yours.
Jackie, and I hope that you and everyone on the call can hear me. Let me also quickly turn on my webcam so you can put a face to the name. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. As Jackie mentioned, my name is Luke. I work for Sustainable Energy for All. Within Sustainable Energy for All, my focus is on our Powering Healthcare program, where we focus on the nexus between reliable energy, reliable electricity on the one hand, and improved health outcomes on the other hand, with our main geographic focus being energy deficit countries, so the countries that have a distinct lack of reliable power, especially in more rural settings. So next slide, please. Ella or Jackie, I don't know, do you have access to my presentation?
Yeah, we can see the second slide of the presentation. Can you see? Sorry for the technical problems.
There we go. Okay, I think we're back. Apologies for that. Let me just bring us back here. So I just want to use this opportunity to set the scene a little bit, to make sure that you also understand what the current barriers are, what the state of play is on health facility electrification, and then especially hone in a little bit more around the appliance space, to give you maybe some ideas around topics to focus on moving forward. But these are just a handful of data points that I think do tell a good story, even though we don't have a lot of data in the space. I think that's barrier number one, as we'll see later on. But the data that we do have clearly does show that there is a there's a serious gap, there's a serious problem, both on access to power, so just having electricity to begin with, and then also the reliability of that power. So we do see a lot of health facilities that may be connected to some kind of an electrical grid or a mini grid, but then the reliability of that power is not up to par, which of course has very negative impacts on health service delivery. So just to highlight two statistics, let's start at the top left. So this is from it's more or less the most recent survey on health facilities with a very large scope as well, looking at not only low-income countries but also middle-income countries, and basically coming out with a number of 59% of all health facilities in low and middle income countries lack reliable power. That doesn't mean that they have no power, it means that they lack reliable power. So that's a large group, 60% basically of the health facilities that have either no power, that have a little bit of power. So as we say, they're under electrified or they're unreliably electrified. And then the other statistic, let's move to the other side. So on the bottom right, you'll see 70% of equipment breaks down. This statistic is kind of outdated, but it does tell a good story around the importance of having reliable power for actually being able to use medical appliances, electricity-dependent medical appliances, and the importance of having reliable power to enable the appliance side of health service delivery. Next slide, please. So let's start with a little bit of good news as well. It's not that we don't know what to do to solve this problem from a technical or an infrastructure point of view, especially on the supply side. And when I say supply side, I talk about the power supply side. So this is all about renewable energy in particular, or other types of energy solutions, power solutions that can be deployed in a fairly rapid manner in these very remote rural areas where many of these health facilities are located. So basically on the left-hand side, you see a range of solutions, from very small scale portable solutions that can provide like the very, very basics, like charging a cell phone, powering a fetal Doppler, and having a couple of targeted lights that you can, for example, use in a maternity ward, all the way up to large scale mini grids that rely 24/7 power, much like we are all used to in wherever we are currently living. So that's the positive side. On the like, kind of having to juxtapose that a little bit with a barrier, we have been working under SE4All on multiple knowledge products, tools, resources that we try to disseminate as widely as possible to try and address some of the barriers that we still see. So the first barrier that we see, which is perhaps the hardest one to solve, is around financing. It's around funding, financing, it's around sustainable financing to make sure that when you're deploying a power solution, you're not just deploying some kind of hardware, some infrastructure, and then you go home again. It is absolutely critical that you implement these types of solutions using delivery models that have a very long-term view, that take into account the maintenance that is required on an perhaps not on a daily basis, but on a weekly, on a monthly, on an annual basis, because otherwise you end up with what unfortunately we have seen in the past and probably up until today, which is a graveyard of solar panels on the rooftops of these clinics. Because it's not that these clinics have never seen solar power before, or generators or any other power sources. The critical barrier has been, how do you keep something running in the long term? How can you finance these, or fund and finance these longer term operating and maintenance activities that are absolutely required to make sure that these solutions actually reach their natural end of life rather than a forced end of life? Next slide, please. Good, because today's focus is more about appliances. I did want to mention efficiency, energy efficiency, as an absolutely important, critical aspect of of powering healthcare, of how do you provide power to a health facility, and how much power do you need to provide. The efficiency side, and I see some layout has gone off a little bit, but this is more just to give you a bit of an example of what it could look like if you have a standard health facility with the conventional medical equipment that we typically see in especially in primary healthcare facilities in sub-Saharan Africa, whether it's like microscopes and centrifuges and fans and lighting. What that picture looks like from a financial perspective, if you bring in energy efficiency as a concept, if you bring in energy efficiency to really bring in like the most reliable, the most energy efficient medical appliances and also other appliances. Like lighting is not necessarily exclusively a medical appliance. Water pumping is another big energy driver, where a lot of gains can be made by basically upgrading to the latest available technology. And this is technology that is not just exclusively available in the most like in the richest of nations. This is equipment that actually is actually quite prevalent already in many rural areas, especially on at the household level, where we've seen a massive push for energy efficient appliances, for example, for TVs, for radios, for indoor lighting. I think we're all quite familiar with LED light bulbs, but increasingly also for refrigeration, and we see a lot of these gains spilling over, but perhaps not fast enough, and that's where the barrier still lies, into the medical appliance space as well. Next slide, please. Good. I think this is my final slide, but I just want to give you like one quick overview again of what are the big barriers that are holding back the deployment of energy solutions to health facilities. Because you may say, and I hope that you're all saying, this is so evident, of course, a health facility needs power. And luckily, I'd say in this COVID-19 world, increasingly the number of people who acknowledge the importance for electricity when we talk about the need for ventilators, talk about the need for water and sanitation and hygiene programs, and having running water, sterilizing your equipment. These are all big drivers of energy and usually of electricity. So why are we not necessarily seeing a massive push for electrifying all these health facilities? I basically tried to divide it up in these 6 barriers. So the first one, I think I alluded to it already, it's data. First big barrier is data. Two types of data actually. The first type of data would be impact data. So to really understand and to be able to prioritize and to make a stronger case around why is electricity so important for healthcare delivery, up to the extreme. You would want to be able to say, even though that's very difficult, of course, you'd want to be able to say, like, 1 unit of energy will lead to whatever, a life saved. Like to really understand that pathway between reliable power on the one hand and health outcomes, improved health outcomes on the other hand. So that's the type of impact data that can tell a very strong story that we have already seen in the past in healthcare focused around vaccines. So I think, like, I hope we're all quite familiar with the importance of vaccines, the importance of having a cold chain to really support vaccine delivery, and what that actually means both for social development, economic development, and general health of the population. The second type of data is really quite practical. It's around, where are these clinics? How many clinics are we talking about? How many clinics do not have enough power? How many clinics have no power whatsoever? Which clinics, especially with today's mindset, which clinics are COVID-19 priority sites, which ones have high traffic, which ones are well positioned geographically, logistically to become hubs, be it for testing, be it for treatment, be it for isolation. So that kind of data is absolutely critical to allow, especially in the public space, so to allow governments, ministries of health, as well as the larger donors, to be able to make informed decisions on the basis of real data, real up-to-date data, because a lot of the data is also very quickly outdated. The second big barrier, which is also quite critical, I'd say, for today's audience, is around energy demand. So to date, the majority of the conversations in powering healthcare have been dominated by the power supply side. So it's been dominated by renewable energy generation of electricity. It's about like how can we get solar power to these clinics, but and that's only part one of the question, of course. Part two of the question is which appliances are actually in play? Which appliances can we find at these health facilities? Which appliances should we find in these health facilities? Which appliances are recommended in a national health strategy or in a national health policy? How can we get energy efficient appliances to these health facilities? So that's basically like a big two parts of the question, and the two need to dock as well in some way. You need to understand which appliances are in play, how often do you use them in a day, what kind of training requirements are there as well for these for the health facility staff to be able to use the medical appliances, so that you know how much power you actually should be able to provide, both for today, tomorrow, and also, of course, for next year, for 10 years from now, so that you can like immediately plan for the future. And that basically captures the third barrier as well around what kind of technologies are then appropriate to address that growing energy demand at the health facility. Barrier number four, I touched on it as well. It's around financing. It's around making sure that we find the right type of the right types of dollars, euros, British pounds, or whichever currency we're looking at, to address this problem, which is, of course, primarily situated in public health, so public health facilities, and within the public health facilities, primarily in the primary healthcare facilities, so the ones that are like quite decentralized, quite deeply distributed across a country, typically quite rural, and the most likely to be in an off-grid setting, compared to, say, like a university hospital in the capital city, which will inevitably be connected to some kind of grid, which doesn't mean that they will not have their own power issues, but when we think about the powering healthcare space, the primary healthcare facilities is really where the big problem is today, that we collectively want to and need to address. And that leads us to barrier number 5 around sector capacity, because this is something that, like I approach this topic primarily from an energy perspective. That is my background, but for every energy person that brings this topic to the table, we need a health person to bring the topic to the table as well, because you absolutely need to have both. That one single sector cannot solve this problem, and that is probably also why we're still in this situation today, that because it's not that the energy sector can just quickly resolve it, because there are so many health specific components to this problem, like as I alluded to, like policies and procurement and appliances and health facility staff and how is the health sector financed, that you need to rely on the health sector as much as you're relying on the energy sector. So there's a big question, like how do you coordinate between two sectors? How do you really address what is essentially an intersectoral problem? How do you do that at the global level? How do you do that at the national level? How do you do that at a very decentralized level? And then basically the last barrier that brings all of this together is around sustainability. It's around how do you make sure that what you do today keeps on giving tomorrow, keeps on giving next year, keeps on giving in the next 10 years. Because the track record of long-term sustainability is poor. So we do see a lot of these interventions fail prematurely, fail within a couple of years, because of a lack of maintenance, a lack of skills, a lack of understanding, but typically also just a lack of dollars, a lack of funding. A lack of funding available just to replace one wire, to replace one fuse, to clean the solar panels. Whatever little intervention needs to happen, and it's all of those interventions, of course, that need to happen. But any one of these can trigger, unfortunately, these systems to stop working. So I'll leave it at that. I can stay on the line for another 7 minutes to 10 minutes if there are any immediate questions, and otherwise, I've already told the organizers as well, if there are any questions at a later stage as well, please feel free to reach out to me, or feel free to reach out to Jackie, and then she can relay all your questions to me as well. But I hope this at least gave you a bit of an understanding around where the gaps are today in powering healthcare, but also where some of the opportunities are. And maybe before I close, I made a little note here on my sheet, which is not on this on this slide, just to bring up the big barrier and also opportunity that we see probably starting next year in a post COVID-19 world, if and when a vaccine is available and needs to be rolled out. What does that mean for a country that is already struggling both with healthcare and electricity to roll that out, to have a reliable cold chain, to make sure that X%, whatever that X may be, to make sure that X% of the population can have access to the vaccine. I think that is one of the bigger topics that touches both on electricity, on the medical side, on the appliance side, as well as on health service delivery, that we collectively as a sector will be facing very, very soon. So I just wanted to bring that up as well as like a little niche topic within the powering healthcare space that will require specific attention. And with that being said, I'll hand it back to Jackie or to Ella. I'll mute myself here, but I'll remain available for a couple more minutes.
Many thanks, Luke, for this great presentation and sharing those barriers and opportunities with all our students and academics today. There are still no questions. Maybe attendees might need a little bit more of time, but I'm happy to collect all those questions and redirect them to you when they come. Yeah, I'm conscious about the time, and I know that you have to leave and to get ready for another event starting shortly. So I just want to thank you again very much for being here today and sharing your knowledge with us, and give you the opportunity to have the final thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I think there are a lot of barriers, but every barrier comes with an opportunity. And it's those are the ones that we ultimately need to keep on focusing on. And depending on whether you're approaching this more from a health side or from an energy side or from a policy side or from a financing side, we all have things to contribute. And we essentially need to make progress at the global level when it comes to, say, like medical standard, like minimum medical quality standards for appliances for rural primary healthcare, up until like basically like finding solutions all the way at the micro level. What does this one particular health facility in rural Uganda, what do they actually need? How can we get it done for them? Because if we keep on working all the way in the ether, then we run the risk of not doing anything. So yeah, I'd recommend anyone who's interested in exploring this topic further to do a little bit of research. There are a couple of organizations really working quite deeply on this topic, especially on the appliance side. That I recommend that, you know, like if individuals or if teams are interested in exploring this further, that they reach out to them as well. More than happy to provide, you know, like, some names or some organizations if and when the time is ripe. But otherwise, I'd say good luck, and I hope that I was able to convince some of you to at least take a closer look at what we're doing or what we're trying to do, and how we're trying to do it.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you very much. Hopefully, yeah, the students and academics here today have enjoyed as much as I've done.
Thank you, and good luck with the rest of the webinar.
Thank you. Good luck with your other event. Okay, so Ella, if you can move to the next slide, please. And next one. Yeah, thank you. Before moving to the next presentation, Assunta, please allow me a couple of minutes to ask participants today a couple of quick questions. So you will have a pop-up window on your screen to answer 2 questions. First one is, what, in your opinion, is the most important medical device for general health service delivery? Lining, water purifier, sterilizer, fans, air conditioning, ICT equipment. So if you can please start answering what you think it would be the most important. I have to say that there is not a right or wrong answer, and we are not expecting you to be experts in the sector yet. Thank you. We are receiving the answers. Okay, so 50% of you think, around 50%, things are keep changing. Say that lining is the most important, followed by the sterilizers and water purifiers. Thank you. And then another question for you. In your opinion, what is the most important medical device for health service delivery? I think you have the pop-up window, so if you can answer, the answers are ventilators, vaccine refrigerators, X-ray machines, microscope, oxygen separator. Obviously, there are many more medical devices that are essential for the healthcare system, but among those listed here, which one, in your opinion, you think it will be the most important? And I see you answering. Well, I think there is a clear two main options, 50-50, 40-50, between vaccine refrigerators and microscopes. And some of you have responded also X-ray machines. Thank you for your answers. As I say, there is not a right or wrong answer. But if you are interested in exploring a little bit more on the perceived demand of medical infrastructure and devices, you have more information and links to different reports on the Design Challenge Brief. And now, Assumpta will share her knowledge of the sector and an example of a device Neopenda has developed. So we can go to the next slide, and Assumpta, the floor is yours. If you can unmute and switch on your camera so we all can see you and hear you.
Yeah, I seem to be having technical issues with my camera. It is on, but it's not displaying anything.
Okay, no problem. At least we can hear you. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning. My name is Assumpta Nantume, and I am the research coordinator for Neopenda. Neopenda is a medical device company, and we are trying to create innovative health solutions for low-income countries, which are faced with challenges like grid access and limited accessibility to energy. And today I'll be talking about our efforts to create a wireless vital signs monitor, and this is something that we're currently testing in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Next slide. So yeah, next slide, sorry. The efforts I'm discussing today have been conducted in partnership with the innovators of the technology, that's Sona Shah and Teresa Calvel. So I just wanted to declare that conflict. Next slide. So the solution that we set out to solve with our first technology and with Neopenda in general is the image you see in front of you. Many appliances and equipment that are developed for the purposes of delivering health services are not sustainable or feasible in low and middle income countries because of some of the issues that Luke brought up. Sustainability is one of them. Needing to repair spare parts, or sometimes not being able to afford the most up-to-date technology and having to purchase technology that is almost going to be obsolete and you won't be able to find spare parts for once it's discontinued. And as a result, many of them end up in this situation where you find massive equipment graveyards somewhere on the hospital site, or you find a closet somewhere that has a whole stack of equipment that's unfortunately not in use yet. The situation is that this equipment is not readily replaced, so there is a need for it on the hospital, but often the healthcare on staff have to find other innovative ways to do the different activities they need when they can't access this equipment. Next slide. So the reality on the ground in high-income countries is that they do have this equipment, and they have utilities like power, Wi-Fi, and spare parts, which allow them to continue care with this equipment. On the ground in low and middle income countries, you find that often staff have to rely on manual methods. Like for instance, they will use stethoscopes to manually count heartbeats or pulse rate. They will use chest movements to estimate respiratory rate. And sometimes they will have pulse oximeters, but often they'll have one pulse oximeter that's often shared by many nurses at a time, and this affects their workflow activity. Global health interventions have tried to respond to this need. We have many innovators out there who are trying to create solutions similar to Neopenda. Neopenda's advantage is that we are targeting 4 vital signs. So instead of just a pulse oximeter, which would measure pulse rate and oxygen saturation, we combined 2 other functions into our device, and that's respiratory rate and temperature. And I'll explain later on the next slide. There are so many statistics about poor health outcomes in low and middle income countries, and reasons why this might happen have also been explored. So in 2017, Uganda reported around 36,000 newborn deaths, and many researchers believe that at least 80 to 90% of neonatal deaths are preventable. They result from conditions that can be caught easily and conditions for which there are effective treatments if the patients are able to get them in a timely manner, and if the health workers are appropriately trained to provide these interventions. There's also the challenge of workforce. We have very low health workforce in low and middle income countries, and you find that nurses and clinicians are overwhelmed by huge numbers of patients that need their care. And so this makes it all the more complicated. If they don't have the equipment that they need, they have to do a lot of manual activities, yet if they had more automated processes, they could do more sensitive tasks, and this would help alleviate at least some of the health worker issues. And then you find that you see how this translates into the poor outcomes. When we did a baseline survey of 20 facilities in Uganda, we found that 4% of these facilities in our needs assessment were not able to provide adequate vital signs monitoring to critically ill newborns. That is, only 4% of the newborns on these wards were continuously connected to the equipment they needed to monitor their vital signs. And this is how we came to from this needs assessment, this is how we came to designing a vital signs monitoring solution as our first product. Next slide. So what we've done with the Neopenda, approach to designing devices is something that Luke touched upon in his presentation. He talked about knowing what the users want and what the users need and engaging them in the process so that you're ultimately creating a solution that will work for them. You cannot create a solution in a silo. So Neopenda did go out to Uganda, and we did speak with many nurses and clinicians on the ground to try to understand what their most critical needs were. And this is how vital signs monitoring came up, and specifically the 4 vital signs that we chose to put into our product. Nurse Damali is someone we've worked closely on the ground with for over 4 years now. And she's just one of the many incredible nurses that we've engaged in our product design. And so we go through many iterations of the product, we take them back to the user, and they're able to critique it and say, well, we don't have power at this frequency, or we don't have this sort of power plug, or this will be the challenge in terms of, is this feasible? The tablet will be at risk of not being utilized properly if it doesn't do this exactly. And so we take all this feedback into consideration, and then we put it in our product design process. Next slide. So we've had a very human-centered approach to designing this, and that is something that's really important when you're designing not only health appliances, but any sort of product that you mean to be sustainable and usable in challenging environments. So this is what the NeoGuard system looks like. It comes with a headband and a device that's typically worn around the forehead for the newborns. We chose the forehead for feasibility issues. Newborns are very small, and they have really tiny arms. So we wanted something that could fit on a majority of newborns, and the head was the best position. And also for accuracy reasons, we found that the forehead was a good place to attach the band to. The arm was too small, and then the nurses had concerns that if it's on the leg, there are sanitation issues, if sometimes the baby leaks through their diaper, and that makes it harder for them to clean and keep the disinfection procedures at a high level that we want them to be at. And so we decided on the forehead for that reason. So we have a tablet that's provided with the device, and one tablet can pair up to 15 devices. So you have 15 devices, and both the devices and the tablets are battery powered. The devices have batteries that can run up to 120 hours continuously, so that is approximately 5 days. You can monitor your patient for up to 5 days before you need to recharge this. And it doesn't need a very high voltage to charge, so this is something that can be charged even with just a solar system if that's what's available at the health facilities. So on the tablet, you see some red tabs. These red tabs usually provide real-time alerts. If the newborn is in distress, they will flash red. And then there's also an auditory alarm that is given off on the tablet so that the nurse who is sitting with the tablet can hear a sound if the devices are going off. The devices themselves also have 2 lights that blink, red if the vital signs are out of range and if the nurse needs to check on the newborn. And I'll be happy to talk more about the different functions of the system and what the product actually looks like. I wish I had a camera. I would be able to show you an actual device. Next slide. So vital sign measurements are really important for the following reasons. I'm sure we have some people who might have at least some health background, since a lot of you are interested in healthcare appliances. So heart and pulse rate are a good indicator of any defects, as well as symptoms of infections and organ failure. Then also oxygen saturation lets you know if the different tissues and the different cells are receiving the oxygen that they need. And then the respiratory rate, of course, lets you know that the patient is breathing as they should, so that they're not susceptible to apnea, which is very common with neonates, and also that they do not fall into lower oxygen levels. And then also the temperature is important because it's a good indicator of hypothermia, which is a high risk that premature babies face, as well as a good indicator of infection for patients that might not be hypothermic for any other, that might have high temperature due to a viral or bacterial infection or even malaria. Next slide. This is again just more detail on the system. Many people with a biomedical engineering background are curious to know how it is that we detect all 4 vital signs. Well, we do this through 2 sensors. The pulse oximeter sensor is the one that gives us pulse, respiratory rate, and oxygen saturation. We've developed an algorithm that can deduce respiratory rate from the same capillary waveforms that are used to detect pulse and oxygen saturation. Then the temperature sensor measures temperature. It comes with a reusable band, and then the device can go in and out of the band so that these 2 units are cleaned separately. Next slide. In addition to just monitoring vital signs, we have an added advantage of archiving data. So it's great that as far as possible, when you're able to create a solution, you think of other applicabilities of this solution. So when we decided that we wanted to host the display on a tablet, we thought of what else we can do with a tablet. And one other gap there is with digitalization of information in low resource settings that don't have access to grid and computers and other equipment like that. And so we thought it might be a good way for them to be able to store their patient information on this tablet. And so our tablet can input all the patient information that they need. We have comprehensive patient information forms, and these can also be customized to the needs of the hospital if they need other variables and information to be put into those forms. And then eventually this information can be aggregated over time. Like you can generate reports for patients over the past 30 days. And this is a great way for you to assess the effectiveness of the care that you're giving, and also trying to realize and recognize other gaps in the system that you might be able to address, and seeing where the issues are, like whether it's birth asphyxia, that's a huge problem on your ward. Why is it birth asphyxia? What can you do in terms of training of healthcare staff, in terms of provision of ventilators, oxygen, or anything else that you might need to solve this problem? Next slide. Yeah, just going back to this being a very human-centered design process, we work very closely with the users. In field, sometimes we just go around collecting informal data. We do a lot of hospital visits. To date, we've done, I think we're coming close to 100 hospital visits. It was 80 by the end of last year, but we've been slowed down by COVID. But we meet with a lot of hospital administrators and clinical staff on the ground. We create a lot of workshops where we work with both engineers and health staff to understand the usability of the product and any human factors aspects that we haven't thought of. The co-founders are in country at least 2 to 4 times a year. Next slide. This is just our product design history. We've had 3 major device iterations. We started with the larger one on the left. It transitioned to version 2, a more miniaturized version with some additional features. And then eventually version 3, which is the commercial ready product that has all the final design elements that we tested with the users that were found appropriate at the time we implemented our design freeze. Next stage. Next slide. So here's where we are in the process of our product right now. We've gone through market research, product R&D, patent filing, and proof of concept. And at this stage, I will ask my first poll question. After conducting proof of concept and feasibility studies, what do you think would come next in the product design process? Are we done with the poll? So the correct answer is clinical trials, which is the stage we're at now. I'm curious to know what the poll responses were.
Yeah, there were 38% of attendees saying clinical trials.
Okay.
And also 38% say informative usability testing.
So usability testing is very close to the right answer, but that in the product design stage should be considered under proof of concept, because this is something that you have to be able to provide before you start clinical trials. So it's not wrong, and often it can be paired with clinical trials. However, if you get to the clinical trial stage and you find that their usability or human factors issues that you haven't accounted for, that becomes very problematic and will take you further back in the process. So as much as possible, I would encourage you to do human factors and usability engineering testing at the proof of concept stage. Next slide. So in light of COVID-19, we've decided to expand use of our product to older pediatric patients as well as adult patients. It was originally a newborn product, which is the reason it was designed the way it was. But now we're exploring use in older pediatric patients and adult patients. There will be some changes to the product design. As we make this transition, we will have to see if it's feasible to keep on the forehead, or if now we have to move it to the upper arm, or other body part, since that will be more feasible in larger patients compared to newborns. Next slide. And yeah, so these are some of the changes that we've implemented. So far, we've just created a band extender to make it fit larger head circumferences of up to 62 centimeters. Then we've done some software changes as well, just to make the patient information forms more specific to adults and to make the alarm limits clinically acceptable ranges for adult patients as opposed to newborns. Next slide. So at the moment, we're doing some adult testing. We have a study planned at Jinja Regional Referral Hospital in Uganda. This is expected to run between November and December. We hope we will get IRB approval for that either by the end of this week or by early November. So the study objectives here are to look at accuracy, feasibility, and safety. So I have my second poll question at this stage. If you were designing a feasibility study, which of the following study methods would you consider using? This is very early stage, so you're just you want to make sure that your tool is accurate and that it's user-friendly and feasible, and that the patients find it acceptable as well. So which of the following methods would you use?
The poll says that 56% say all of the above, and 22% measurement comparison techniques, and 11% qualitative surveys with end users, and again, 11% said semi-structured interviews with patients.
Yes, so everyone is correct, but the people that said all of the above are the most correct, because you would need all three of these. You would need the measurement comparison techniques, which give you an assessment of your accuracy. That is, you compare your tool to a more established tool, and you need to validate that it performs as good as the gold standard in the setting that you're in, or as similar tools in the setting that you're in that have been deemed appropriate for those settings. Then you want to do qualitative surveys with the end users, who tend to be the nurses and clinicians, so that you get the feedback that they can use this tool, they think it's feasible, and that they will be able to sustain this tool, and that they have no reservations about using this tool, because you don't also want to provide a tool that people are just going to put in a cupboard and not use because they're not happy or satisfied with it. Then as far as possible, you want to engage the patients. This isn't always possible, but where you can, you want to engage the patients. So we can't engage newborns, but we will speak with their parents and say, how do you feel when you see this instrument used on your newborn? Do you have any concerns about it? Because it's not just about the satisfaction of the clinicians, but also making sure that the patients or caregivers who have to interact with this tool are also satisfied with what is being used to treat them. Next slide. So yeah, I think this is the end of where we are. So it's been a very long process. We've been working on this product since 2016, but we're currently wrapping up our clinical trials, and we expect to be in market by January 2020, and we will have CE mark at that stage, which is the equivalent of FDA approval. We're currently already going through the registration process with the National Drug Authority in Uganda and with the Kenya Pharmacy and Poisons Board in Kenya. That is a bit of a lengthy process, but it should take us also about 60 to 90 days to go through once all our submissions are complete. So next to this, we are continuing to adapt the solution for pediatric and adult patients, and we also are creating one for community health workers. So the current system we have can be used up to, I think, health facility levels. We're thinking health facility 2, 3, for, where often grid access is a problem. But also we're interested in putting this out in the community, and so we will be having a more modified product that might be just one device and a phone, and this will be something that community health workers and traditional birth attendants who are also in areas where they don't have access to the utilities they need and need more cost-effective and sustainable health appliances like this, and this would benefit those who receive community-based care. So next to that, we will be creating a surgical variation of this tool as well, and then we'll be pairing this with future products like oxygen flow and separators in the near future. So thank you so much for coming to the end of our presentation. Next slide. To wrap up, I just want to introduce our team. Our CEO, Sona Shah, and Teresa Cavell, who are the co-founders, are based in Chicago, with Cristo Trivedi, our supply chain and operations lead, and Matthew Tombak, our embedded engineer. Then me, myself, Dorothy Anyu, and myself, Assumpta Nantume, and Dorothy Anyu are based in Kampala, Uganda. So we look forward to connecting with you and hearing your feedback and answering any questions you might want to know and helping support you along your product design process as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Assumpta. Thank you for your excellent and informative presentation. And I hope all the attendees enjoy and learn something new today. And now I would like to open the floor to questions from our participants. So please share your questions to Assumpta on the chat box. And we have a question from Charles. He's asking, what is the maximum distance the NeoGuard needs to be from the tablet in order to send the data? And can the system be used for first responders who can monitor patient data?
Yes, it can be used for first responders. So we have used this also in the and for remote monitoring. So we are planning to do feasibility studies with first responders. We are in conversation with AMREF in Kenya about possibly pairing this with I think they provide some ambulance services in Kenya. So we will be looking into that. We haven't tested it yet, but it should be something that first responders can use. Then the maximum distance is 100 meters. It can communicate with the device up to 100 meters.
Thank you, Assumpta. Also, we have another question from Alec Wamu. Do you accept concept notes, and can NeoPenda partner with local innovators without the capacity in terms of equipment, especially in Uganda? And the second part of the question, can they work on more innovations within the health ecosystem even after school?
So the first one, do we accept concept notes? Yes, we love to partner with researchers. At the moment, we are partnering with quite a few. We are partnering with Makerere University School of Public Health, who has been such an incredible partner on the ground. We are partnering with Hewatele in Kenya and Center for Public Health and Development in Kenya, AmeriCares in Tanzania. So there's just so much synergy and so much more you can do as a collaborative team. So even from smaller innovators or smaller health facilities who have an idea on how they can implement our solution or pair our solution within their programs and projects to improve health service delivery overall, we would very, very much love to see those concept notes. I'd be happy to share my email address if anyone has a concept note that you're willing to share with me. We'd love to collaborate and potentially apply for joint grants if that is something you're interested in, depending on what opportunity is available there. We want to scale this as far as possible, and we're interested in working with users that think they have a need for our product and would like to add it to their systems. The other question, I'm not sure I quite got it.
I'll read it again. Can they work on more innovation within the health ecosystems even after school? I guess he meant the local innovations, local innovators, excuse me.
Local innovators, yes, absolutely. I mean, we've had the advantage of working with teams based in the US, but first and foremost, this has been a locally developed tool. All the market research, all the product research has been conducted in Uganda. So it has applicability beyond just research and developing something. This has gone to the full stage of a commercial product, which will be available for distribution by early next year.
Brilliant. Yeah, Ali Guamumo says that he definitely will need that email.
Okay, I will. I can. Should I add my email to the chat? Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, it seems that there are. Sorry.
I may have added it to the panelists chat. Go on.
Okay. Let me share it for all. Yeah, there you have. Yeah, thank you very much. It seems that. Sorry, yeah, we have one more question. So very quickly, what would you consider the most wanting or needed appliance for improvement in the health sector?
So that is a difficult one to answer just because appliances don't work on their own. Like even with a vital signs monitor, you aren't saving lives if you're not providing ventilators, if you're not providing oxygen, if you're not providing antibiotics. So I would say let's take it step by step. Let's try to solve each problem as it comes. But I would say where the biggest gap exists is definitely in newborn care. So the smallest among us are the ones that are least served. So I would say in general, appliances that serve to newborn needs.
Thank you, Asanta. It seems, yeah, we don't have time for more questions at this point, but I would like to thank you and Luke also that he is not online for your final thoughts and being here today for the students participating of the Efficiency for Access Design Challenge this year.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much.
Good luck to everyone.
It was a pleasure having you. And now to end, I just want to ask the participants to stay 1 minute after the webinar closes because we value your feedback and we are very keen to hear from your opinion and assessment of this webinar, and this will help us to improve our future webinars. We have prepared a short survey and it will take you less than 1 minute to respond. And at this point, I just want to remind you that a recording of this webinar will be available on the Efficiency for Access Design Challenge website in case you want to revisit some of the examples and interesting information you've listened here today. This week, we have a series of webinars on different technologies. Today, we started with the healthcare appliances, and tomorrow we have a webinar focusing on electric cooking appliances. So thank you all and see you on our next webinar.